Okay, and it's 7 o'clock, so I will call the Southbury Board of Selectmen regular meeting, September 17th of 2020 to order at 7 p.m. Could we have the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay, first order of business, I'd like to add a motion, entertain a motion to add to the agenda to discuss the Mylona McBroom proposal for the grant under, we could do that under new business.
So moved.
Made and second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, and it carries. Thank you. Public comment is next, limited to 2 minutes. Please come up, tell us your name and your public comment, and we'll listen. Any public comment? Is that working?
Yep. Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Hi, my name is Rob DeCarli, 566 Flag Swamp Road. I just wanted to say real quickly that QAnon is a series of conspiracy theories that have been described by the Anti-Defamation League as a wide-reaching series of conspiracy theories popular among a range of right-wing extremists and even some public supporters of the president, who adherents follow the anonymous Q and believe that the world governments are run by a shadowy cabal of pedophiles. The reason why I am explaining and bringing that up at all is because our current state senator had decided to put a QAnon decal on his car. And when that was brought to his attention, he defended it by saying that he, although doesn't believe all of the wide-ranging conspiracy theories, he still shares their values of anti-corruption and civic engagement. And honestly, the response to the decal, in my opinion, was worse than the actual decal itself, because QAnon is not a feel-good, community organization. It was described by the FBI in an internal memo as a potential domestic terrorism threat. And so I would ask, given our current state senator's failure to come out strong against these sort of really dangerous ideas that have already gotten people killed, I would ask that the board come out with a stronger statement that hate has no home here in Southbury, and that those sort of baseless accusations are dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Sharon Scarlett, and I have lived in Southbury for 7 years. I've joined committees, clubs, and played many activities around our residents of our town. People are very welcoming and helpful. Being a Jewish American, I have never heard a disparaging racial remark towards anybody in Southbury. Saying we are a racist town will only attract racists who believe that your rhetoric, Mr. Rosen, is true, therefore actually attracting racists. As a selectman, Mr. Rosen, your duty is to adhere to the business of all residents of Southbury. This has been discussed before the Board of Selectmen meeting. Therefore, we need to move forward to continue on keeping our town as great as it is. Thank you.
Any other public business?
John Gray, Patriot Road. Selectman Mike Rosen has again taken to social media in support of his false narrative that Southbury is a racist town full of racist people. Mike has told his followers that a sticker belonging to a hate group called Patriot Front was found on a utility box at Playhouse Corner. Mike has asked everyone to denounce this group, even though Southbury police have reported no appearances, encounters, or arrests with this group in town. A quick web search shows the group to be a bunch of lunatics, so of course we all denounce them as we should. What Mike fails to mention is that there is an actual active hate group here in Southbury. Police have encountered them, and we have their arrest records to prove it. One of this hate group's members was witnessed by Southbury police and others engaging in a robbery during one of their recent protests. He is a member of a group called Southbury BLM. Why does Mike feel like the sky is falling over a bumper sticker, but makes no mention or condemnation of a group here in Southbury that is engaging in actual violence? Probably for the same reason why Mike fails to mention that the man arrested for this violent act is one of his Facebook friends. Has Mike sought to explain his association to someone we know to be violent? Of course not. He'd rather create a diversion instead of addressing actual violence perpetrated by his friends here in Southbury. Mike, we denounce this group and the bumper sticker you found, but this sticker has physically assaulted less people in town than your BLM friend has. It's time to speak up, Mike. Your silence over this violent act committed by your personal friend sends the message that you condone violence here. It's time to stop valuing politics over the safety of innocent Southbury residents. Thank you.
Nick Hanley, Southbury. I'm going to take a broader view. Who is anyone to declare an entire town racist? So you leave here and you go to another town and they say, where are you from? I'm from Southbury. Oh God, you're a racist. That is probably the most despicable thing anybody can do, an entire town. I also ask, where is the proof? Two kids who do things stupidly and will continue to do things stupidly. And you're going to base that on the entire town being racist. I also have lived here 13 years, and I have never heard any derogatory, nasty comments. Not one. But you're going to say the entire town of Southbury is racist. That is truly despicable.
Shanna Bertram, Weston Hook Terrace. On August 15th, I participated in a rally to support law enforcement at Playhouse Corner. I stood at the edge of Route 67 and waved an American flag. I did not have a mask on, but I consciously kept my distance from other rally participants. We were outside on a beautiful summer day. That afternoon, Selectman Rosen posted a photo on several community Facebook sites as well as his own personal page, disparaging First Selectman Manville for not wearing a mask. I am one of two other recognizable people in that photo. Of the 34 comments on Mr. Rosen's personal page, the subjects of the photo were called disgraceful, selfish, irresponsible, defilers of the flag, and other slurs. One in particular stands out. It states, they also use the N-word towards a person of color. At no time in my life have I ever used this derogatory term to describe anyone. During the rally on August 15th, I did not hear Selectman Manville or anyone else around me use that term. What I did hear was a woman on a megaphone from the opposite corner chanting F Trump. Racist was screamed at me by several young people in a dark-colored Audi SUV, and numerous people driving by provided me with the middle finger. That's fine. That's your First Amendment right. But it's also mine to wave the American flag. As of today, the posts I reference are still on Mike Rosen's Facebook page with no attempt by him to modulate. I have attached copies so you can read them for yourselves. Selectman Rosen's choice to sow divisiveness on online forums only serves to illustrate his hypocrisy. You were elected to represent all citizens of Southbury. This is Southbury, and hate has no home here. I am unashamedly a patriot, and I will stand up for what I believe in. I don't back down, and right now I'm considering legal action for slander. Thank you.
Other public comment?
Hi, my name is Cindy Keegan. I live in Heritage Village. And just to kind of jump off the whole racism theme, I grew up in Greenwich, but I believe Southbury is a town that is safe for seniors, families, law enforcement, business owners, children, homeowners, farmers, all minority groups who choose to live here, if they choose to live here. I believe Southbury residents care about the features in this town that contribute to the quality of life and its success: school, education. I believe racism itself has been weaponized. That term has been weaponized by many Democratic leaders, and I believe it is growing. That's the reason why it's growing in cities like New York City, LA, Portland, Kenosha, Baltimore, the list goes on. The Democratic leaders in those cities, they're responsible for the residents' safety. The reason that it has taken off is because, I don't know, they're either incompetent or they just don't care. I believe we are a great country. I believe Southbury is a great town. And my suggestion to anyone who really thinks racism needs to be tackled, take a stroll. Take a stroll down New York City and try and talk some sense into the people who are rioting and just trashing these places. It's awful. People are starting to vote now with their feet. They're just leaving. And that's it.
Thank you.
Greg Kuhn, Perkins Road. I'm speaking to you tonight to express my concern and disappointment in the turn that conversations take when we speak about issues of race in this town, specifically the ones being had on Facebook. Selectman Rosen, you made a public post on Facebook for what at first seemed a relatively innocuous mention about a bumper sticker from Patriot Front, what they represent, wrapping up with a tie to the Hate Has No Home campaign, which I support and believe in. Hate has no home in Southbury. What I object to is your subtle wordsmithing in your public post. By way of when and where the sticker was discovered, you tie the sticker and its hate group directly to Trump supporters by saying it was discovered at a Trump rally. That's irrelevant unless you have further proof. Rather, I see your effort to stereotype Trump supporters by aligning them with a hate group. Reading further in your public post, one of your friends and supporters about First Selectman Jeff Manville says he seems to be one of the bad hombres. Bad hombres? That's racist by any measure of how we judge racism today, using cultural references to characterize people in a world where Trader Joe's can't use Trader Jose to market a jar of salsa. Bad hombre. Another characterizes the same group of people as the uglies, and that they don't get to move in your circle. That's bullying, at the least, and exclusionary as well. And it's not the first time I've seen exclusionary behavior from the left in Southbury. The DTC is endorsing someone running for office right now who makes it their business to ban and block people online. If words mean something to you, if hate has no home in Southbury, then stop using your public position to spark hate. Hate in all its forms, online or otherwise, has no home in Southbury, and I urge you to speak out against this hate I just described to you. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? 3 times in a row, and we are past our public comment section. Okay, announcements and correspondence is in your packet. Next is your reports. You have your reports in the packet. Any questions? Moving on to the consent agenda on item 1, referral from land use. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve it as written.
Do you have a second?
Second?
Made and seconded. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained, and it carries. Next one is the pension resolution.
The consent agenda is all in one, Jeff.
Yeah, it's part of it.
Okay, so, all right, well, I said, okay. So let's just for procedural, for the record, approval of the pension resolution. I had said number 1, it was number 2. Can I have a motion? Second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, and it carries. That's just for clarification, make sure we did it right. Minutes of September 3rd, 2020 regular meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve?
Thank you. I'll
Second?
put a second out there. Very good. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? And it carries. All right. So far, so good. Okay, up next is under the unfinished business, senior enhanced tax relief discussion of an asset test. Claire has researched this, and I'm recommending some sort of a asset test, even if it's a very simple one, only to keep some unscrupulous people honest. I don't think it has to be a complicated test. It doesn't have to be, but at least they will be on the record having said that they have limited assets and homes. Like, do you have more than one home, or are your assets over $100,000? Claire, do you?
Also, are Bill and Tom on the phone?
You have to come up.
They may be on the phone, Jeff. Bill Tolley and Tom Connor may be on the phone if you recognize them. They can't-
Yes, I'm on the phone. Tom
Okay.
Connor. Bill Colley's joining also.
Okay.
It's Bill. There you go.
So anyway, Claire has researched some of the asset tests. You have it in your packet.
Yeah, so I did some research, and then you guys were also sent the recommendation from the task force, and that's why Bill and Tom are joining as well to take any questions on that. My research was more calling the two towns, New Canaan and East Hartford, who have asset tests currently for the circuit breaker local program, and just finding out a little bit about how they do it. New Canaan's is much more extensive than East Hartford's. East Hartford's is just one question, which would probably be more feasible if we were to go that route. New Canaan's asked for all of the backup documentation, and it involves a lot more research, and staffing could be an issue if we went that way. So it's all in the document, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
In reviewing the materials, it looks like,
Jason, someone had approached me or emailed me. They complained that we're not being heard. That's all. Just make sure. Just for the, yeah.
in reviewing the materials, it appeared that you listed 3 towns that have asset tests for this type of program.
Yes.
Was this an exhaustive list, or are there only 3 towns in the state that have an asset test for this type of program?
Yeah, so there's 3 towns. Brookfield is another I didn't put on there because they don't have a full asset test. They have a property value assessment limit. So it's kind of like an asset, but the Stamford, East Hartford, and New Canaan have more of what we're looking at, the financial disclosure assets.
And just as a reminder, with what we're looking to do with the senior tax relief, we're probably one of the most generous in the state. We've enhanced it not once, but now this is the 3rd time, and we are probably with this be one of the most generous. And my goal is I'm okay with that, but I just want to make sure that people don't take advantage of the situation. I don't know if it will happen, but at least they're on record with a simple asset test of if something should come up, you can go back to that, and it may deter some people from taking advantage.
I'll just mention one more thing about the materials, because I don't think these were posted online, at least as of yet. At least anecdotally in your research as you contacted these towns, it appeared, based on your summary, that you're talking about a couple of people in each town that may have received a benefit, that may be have more assets than
Right.
a test might show.
So there's not too many people who get disqualified each year, but it's hard to say how many don't apply because of the asset limit. So it's hard to say like how big the pool of people is, but New Canaan I think said last year they got 3 people who were disqualified.
Well, New Canaan has a fairly complex form you have to fill out.
Yeah.
That would be daunting for
Yeah, and
many
East
folks.
Hartford doesn't include retirement income, while New Canaan does.
How do they define retirement
I
income?
think just IRAs. It's all in the form. It lists all the accounts you have to provide backup for.
So an IRA or a
Yeah.
SEP or something like that would
CDs.
not be.
CDs, mutual funds, savings bonds, money
Okay.
market accounts, trust funds.
And how many people does East Hartford not accept per year?
They said a few each year.
Again, the question is how many are not applying because
A
they know they can't, they probably can't pass an asset test, or they do have. And I've,
No way to know that, really.
and in fact, we've run into that with one of the programs, and the person had not only a home here, but an apartment in Manhattan. When apartments, they may have devalued some, but at the time, it was pretty at its peak, and it was like, that's really not what this is for, and they withdrew from a program. It was a small cities grant to make sure,
So this is an existing program that we already have, and we don't currently have an asset test. How long have we had this program for?
I'm not sure.
The senior tax, the enhanced side of the senior tax relief dates back, I would say 20 years, because I was on that original committee to do the enhancement. My concern is that it's one thing to have, we're becoming one of the most generous. If it was a standard, if we were doing just the state mandated tax relief like all the other towns, that's not so bad. But you're asking the taxpayers to fund a program that is not only the state mandate, but the town enhancement, and then an increased enhancement on top of it. So I think it's time to take a look at whether a program that becomes that generous shouldn't have some sort of a check. And I don't think it needs to be a complicated system, but if we say just simply assets over $100,000, or do you own a second home, that's pretty straightforward. And if you find out later that they weren't truthful about that they did own a second home, and that's where this came up, then or they had assets of sitting someplace that were not considered income, at least we'd have something to stand by that that they had not told the truth on this application.
What is considered an asset? A car? Furniture in your house? I mean, where do you draw the line?
I think it's mostly just what's on the
what you asked
form. Yeah. Mostly
You're
that.
defining, I think, what an asset is
All
based on the requests that you're putting on the form.
Is that the East Hartford form?
That's New Canaan. East Hartford
No.
doesn't have a form, they just have one question.
Well, we were talking about maybe
Yeah,
doing East Hartford style form.
Right,
but,
then that would just be one question added to the application that we already use.
So if it's one question, what is the question? How much asset do you have?
Do you have assets over,
Well, again,
however-
what are those assets defined as?
that leaves it, I don't know.
Whatever
if-
you own,
yeah,
assets.
Interpretation.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
If it's not specific, then it's open to interpretation.
you have a boat maybe, or you have a horse, or
Do you think we should be giving tax relief to people who are owning and boarding horses that are worth $50,000 in a boat?
well, I've had horses, and I can tell you that they don't make you wealthy; they make you poorer.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I could, it's Bill Colley, can you hear me?
Bill's up.
Go ahead, Bill.
Just let me take 2 minutes and kind of lay out the task force's position on this. We wrote a letter back in November of 2019 addressing the request by Jeff to take a look at asset tests. And hopefully all of you have had a chance to read that, but let me just synopsize what it means. We thought that the cost and complexity of administering a requirement like this outweighs the benefits of rejecting what we think would be a very small number of people who have a very unusual combination of substantial assets and low income. And let me come back to what I mean by substantial later, because that's really important here. The second point is the vast majority of the towns in Connecticut that have a local seniors credit program, there's 93 of them, 89 don't include an asset test or net worth test. The third point is it'd be very difficult to request and then test and enforce 450 annual submissions of each applicant's assets and net worth. And that's let's call it the New Canaan approach. You submit a very detailed list of all your cash and savings account, money market funds and stocks and horses and boats and so on. The other approach is we ask a simple question, and based on trust, I guess, we would hope that people would tell us, based on a definition yet to be defined of what assets are, including, by the way, what liabilities are associated with that asset list, because people can have big assets and big liabilities with a net worth of 0. So it's going to be difficult, in our view, to test and enforce a rigorous net worth, not asset-only test. And moreover, it's going to, the complexity of putting that in place, if it's a New Canaan-like detailed request, is going to deter probably more seniors from applying than the number of people that we would catch. The flip side of that is, if you go with the simple question, one, it's trust-based, there's no teeth in it, and it's very subjective on the part of somebody, I'm not sure who that somebody is, to determine whether or not we believe their statement or not, and then, of course, ask them for detailed submissions. So our recommendation back in November said if the Board of Selectmen overrides our recommendation, which is to not have an asset test, let's keep it as simple as possible. Let's exclude primary residence. And the asset test, and this is important, the asset test should be set at no less than $300,000, because today, in today's world, with yields on money market funds and savings account at essentially 0, having $100,000 of assets in retirement is essentially nothing. It does not, to me, that is not the right level of support. And that is only if you guys override our recommendation to not have an asset test period. Sorry for the long speech, but I wanted to brief the group on the task force's view, and I think it's important to add that we were unanimous in our view, including Mr. Bertram. Thanks.
Right, and let me add, this is Tom Connor, let me add one piece to that. I agree with everything that Bill said, but the additional problem, and certainly if we do it, let's do it simple, but the additional problem with the sort of East Hartford approach, I think, is it becomes kind of arbitrary about how we enforce it, and then we open ourselves up to kind of legal issues about enforcing it, about doing it sort of arbitrarily.
Okay, thank you.
How do you guys feel? I mean, you mentioned, Bill, about net worth as opposed to just assets. I mean, what if you have a big mortgage and you have liabilities? You may have assets, but
right,
they're offset. So, I mean, how do you really need to look at net worth? It gets very complicated, and I just don't see it as a very easy system to administer. People could just state their numbers, whatever they want. Who's going to go back and check? You're going to audit them? I mean, it just, I don't think it's practical. And I think we've had this discussion within our task force. So, I mean, I'm just reiterating what you guys are saying. I think the asset test it's a great idea and concept in theory, I think, to not give any tax abatements to people that don't really need them, but how do you administer it? How do you make a practical test that works? I don't think it's possible.
Well, the point I'm making here is that we have enhanced this program. What you're taking from what we were originally paying as the circuit breaker plus, and what you added and enhanced it once was when the state dropped the reimbursing us for the mandated senior tax relief, and now we're adding a third level to it. I'm getting concerned is being one of the most generous. What checks are in place for the rest of the taxpayers in the town of Southbury who are having to offset this? And it may not be a lot of money. Some people may think it's not a lot of money, but some people who are working out there and are not seniors and families, they are making up the difference. And I want to make, I'm trying to make sure that those who get the help actually need the help. And if you are living, if you have $500,000 in net assets, and let's face it, I mean, if you have a $500,000 home and you have a $450,000 mortgage, I think we can see that there's only $50,000 in real asset there. I don't think you're going to see much of that, but I just would like to have some kind of a check. But if the board feels that we don't need an asset test, and on the program, we have it on others, renters.
We have it on the energy assistance for social services has it, and I believe renters rebate.
And renters rebate. So there's already, most of these people will qualify for one of these programs and has an asset test. Is it worth doing it to administer it? Evidently so. Mike?
So I don't necessarily have an issue with the concept and consideration of an asset test. I think we wouldn't be inventing a wheel necessarily. There are other municipalities that do it. I think, we all know we have a significant portion per capita per population, much larger, and portion of seniors, and with that I think comes a even higher level of responsibility to care for those of our most vulnerable seniors. I'm wondering if a potential step we take would be the committee still has not been disbanded, I believe, right? They still do exist. We never disbanded that committee. I'm wondering if we could, based on the information that's now been provided to us tonight, ask the committee to come back with a recommendation on how we would implement an asset test, to keep it as simple as possible. We don't have to make this decision necessarily.
We laid that out already.
And give them, and give them a chance. And there was a reason the folks on that committee were chosen for their expertise and experience, and they came forth with a good understanding, a good presentation for us. But I think the concept of an asset test works. I think the implementation of it is hard, and also don't want to put too much of an onus on staff here at Town Hall as well. So I'm wondering if that might be a step where they can come back to us with a recommendation on how we would implement it efficiently. Because I do think, certainly you want to make sure that all those are participating in the system, should be in the system. And I don't think there are many who game the system, but I think you want to make sure there's a level playing field, and that's a way to do it.
For instance, there are people like, there would be people from Grace Meadows who would they've already gone through a test to get there. That's already available. So these types of things, there's going to be some situations where you're going to have no doubt that there's not something that
and I have no issues, Jeff, with the richness of our program. I think that comes with being a Southburyan. We have that distinct characteristic in our town. But I think if we can figure out a way to efficiently do this and fairly do it, I think George's point of how do you have to make sure that it's being implemented fairly. And if we can go to the expertise of those on the committee and ask them for a recommendation, maybe that's a path forward.
Is someone trying to?
I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the committee met with Claire, or members of the committee, and
We did.
and made a recommendation.
We've beat this thing up 5 ways from Sunday, and I don't think the committee is going to change their view. We have some pretty good finance people on the committee. I mean, Bill Tolley is a master. Tom is Tom. I've done reasonably well myself. And I would like to say that based on this asset test, if you exclude retirement accounts, I would qualify, because I don't keep money in a checking account. I mean, if you exclude the house, the cars, which, my cars are old, they're not worth much, and my furniture in my house, I would pass that test, because I don't put money in everything I have is like in retirement accounts, so it would be excluded.
So to that point, you could apply for the senior tax relief.
I could get it.
And there is no asset test, and you could get it.
No, he's saying he could get it with the
You
asset
could
test.
get it with the asset test, is
I'm
what I'm
not saying
saying.
this is
And a
the
lot of
asset
people are
test.
in that situation. If their money's tied up in 401ks, you don't include it, then
I think
It's not an
the
asset.
point of
Bill
excluding,
Tolley, could I jump in?
Wait a minute, go ahead, Claire.
I was just going to say the East Hartford assessor said the main point is to exclude people with second homes. That's the main point of it.
Go ahead, Bill Tolley.
Just a couple of points. First is the cost of our recommended changes to the senior tax abatement program as it exists today is $35,000. It's a relatively small amount of money. The second point is you've got 594 participants, give or take, in the senior tax abatement local program today. That means that if you guys choose to put in some form of, I guess we're talking about a net asset test, net worth test, not an asset test, that you would have 594 submissions of something. Maybe that's one page, maybe it's not. In our letter of November 2019 that first addressed this question, we laid out, as I said earlier, what our recommendation would be if the Board of Selectmen overrides the recommendation to not have an asset test program. And it said, keep it simple, short one-page form, applicant certification, make it a net worth submission, which is complicated for most seniors to figure out, and exclude the primary residence, and the asset maximum should be set by the Board of Selectmen, but in our view, no less than $300,000. That would generate, at a 6% yield, a whopping annual income of $18,000 for a senior. So we've already made our recommendation. We made a backup recommendation if the Board of Selectmen overrides our recommendation. And yes, our task force has not formally been disbanded, but we haven't met in almost a year.
So I guess my thing when hearing all of this is that if the main focus is really just to find out if somebody owns a second home, say somebody owns a condo worth $75,000, or even it's $110,000 if that's the $100,000 mark that we're limiting, but so they wouldn't qualify, but someone could have $2 million in retirement accounts and they do. That's what I'm with George on this. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. What are we really getting after here? So.
Well, but I mean, this is the other point. This is Tom Connor. Is that I could, you know, like again, I'm a finance guy, and so I've got a lot of experience in this sort of stuff. I could cook up maybe 150 different scenarios for you about different stuff, right? And how do you cover all those scenarios? I don't know. You probably spend more on lawyers and finance guys for the next 2 years than you wipe out anything. You wipe out many times the amount that you're trying to deal with here, right? So I think either you do it. I think that the task force recommendation is to do something very simple, knowing that there's lots of different possibilities to break this simple, and you probably don't even enforce it much. But you have something there, because if you try to do, say, what New Canaan does, or do more sophisticated things, there's always going to be ways for people to arbit, right?
That's the point I'm making. At least if we have an asset test that looks like something that someone's got to fill out, doesn't have to be complicated, that would make them aware that we are looking. And if something was to come to our attention, then we can make a note, bring it to the person who's applying for the tax release attention, and ask them, can you explain this discovery of a vacation home in someplace else? It's obviously not going to catch every scenario, every place you go, but at least there's a check there that they know is going to be there. Jason, you had?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Personally, I have a concern about putting this additional burden on our seniors, the administrative burden. But at the end of the day, as I look at the recommendations, correct me if I'm wrong, all we're changing is we're increasing the limit, the income limit for married people by about $8,000.
The changes were quite small.
That's the, like, we're not doing an overhaul of the circuit breaker program. So I don't think this event of increasing the married limit of $8,000 should be an impetus to rework the entire way we do the program. And then on top of it, listening to Emily and George's examples, I'm hearing examples of problems with an asset test where in one scenario, we would not be giving the credit to someone who needs it.
Probably deserves
And
it.
in another scenario, we'd be giving the credit to someone who doesn't need it, all with the same asset test. So it's very arbitrary. So we're adding a lot of burden to a lot of people to try and protect against a couple of scenarios that are not going to have that much of an impact in the long run, and we're probably going to have a negative impact on some folks. So, I mean, for those reasons, I just don't think this is the time, and I don't think that the types of changes we're making to the program altogether should be the driving force of this.
Claire, did you ask the towns that are implementing this, New Canaan and East Hartford, how many people are they turning away through this program?
Yes.
Did you get an idea?
Because of assets or just in general?
Because of assets.
Yeah, so New Canaan said about 3 last year, and East Hartford didn't know exactly. He said a few.
Yeah, this is
But
not
they
going to
also
shift the
don't know.
balance here, so.
They also didn't know how many people didn't apply because of the test.
Yeah.
Mike?
Right now, because I'm not in the program, is the program really just on the honor system?
Pretty much.
I mean,
I thought we got tax returns.
right, I mean, we do
Yeah.
get, that's the other part, I mean, as we're
just on
talking and
income,
listening.
really.
You know, I think if there are clear criteria and, you know, is there any certification whatsoever? The end of that form that New Canaan said I certify and believe to the best of my knowledge that even if there was simply a form that said, here's the criteria for the program, which we have, right? It's in the program, you know, in the program description. So long as there is something that says that, we still can be in a position if we discover through the tax office or other means that someone may not be qualified actually for it, to pursue, you know, to choose, if we so choose to pursue it. I'm actually sort of backtracking a little bit. I think we do want to keep the barrier as low as possible. I think you want to have some degree of at least assurance, you know, some degree of assurance from the seniors. And I agree to Bill's point. You know, even if we did do an asset test, I'd want us to consider the idea of potentially even grandfathering in those who are currently in the program and making it for new people as they come in to move forward. But you know, the more I listen to the conversation, you know, I think the lowest part may simply be a certification that, you know, they, to the best of their knowledge, qualify for the program. And if we, as a town, discover that they no longer qualify for the program, or that they were incorrect, whether it be, you know, with intention or otherwise, that we can take appropriate action.
But Mike, how are you defining qualification for the program? Today it is income-based only. And what's on the table here is adding another level of qualification, whether it's asset or, in my view, net asset, net worth, as opposed to assets, because liabilities and mortgages and what you owe goes against your asset base. But if you're adding another qualification, that is not just a pledge, that is some form of information gathering that gets associated with the pledge.
Yeah, Bill.
And the question on the table, what could that be?
Yeah, I'm actually suggesting that we not do that. I'm actually backing to, so long as, if we follow the recommendation of the committee, but there is some certification that income base that was originally asked for. Yeah, there is. Then you know, I think to Emily's point, we're talking about 3 people.
Wow.
Ish. It could go higher, it could go lower, but yeah, I'm reconsidering the original point of view I had. I do, you know, and I've also said all along that in various issues here, we appoint people to certain commissions with intent, and especially things that are finance related. And I would, in this case, particularly with George's input on the board, actually defer to the committee's recommendation.
I don't think the committee would go back and look at this again and come back with a different recommendation, because we
think
have
they-
gone through this many
they just said
times.
that.
Yeah.
Can I, to sort of cut through this, can I make a motion at this time to not have an asset test for the circuit breaker program?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to not have an asset test on the circuit breaker program. Any discussion on that?
One final word I would throw out from my perspective is that it's very unlikely that someone or a family that has high assets hidden away somewhere or wherever they keep them would live on a low income. I mean, they're gonna be pulling money out of those assets so they can live a little better. So I don't think you're gonna find too many people that have low income in combination with substantial assets.
So my comment here will be that I have seen this happen in my experiences for selectmen here with some programs. So I've experienced it where people have applied and, in my opinion, undeservingly were looking for something. And that was my concern. I'm also saying that in the spirit of looking out for all taxpayers and being one of the most generous towns in the state, which is fine as far as that goes. I don't have a problem with that, with the seniors. And I'll remind everybody that it was on the original Circuit Breaker Plus Senior Tax Relief Committee and recommended it. It's just my concern that there may be someone who would take advantage. I know it's hard to believe people take advantage of a system, but they do. And that's my just trying to get a check from someone that if something strange comes across, they may, it's like doing your taxes, your income taxes. You can always cheat on them. What's the chances? But you're always afraid that if you got caught, the IRS will be there. But, just the threat of that or that concern about that keeps a lot of people honest. That's what I'm trying to, the reason I brought this forward is for that reason.
I hear you, Jeff, but I think that it sounds, even from what you're saying, that this is the potential of that happening is the exception, not the rule. And I fear that from the way that this has been described, that we're going to be turning away more deserving people, or turning them away, or B, scaring them into applying, and we risk more damage than reward by having that in place.
Okay.
Can I just, and I just wanted to acknowledge and indicate that I fully understand that concern, and the rationale for bringing this forward and for getting into this. I don't think anybody wants someone, taking advantage of the system or doing anything like that. But for all the reasons we've discussed, I just don't think it works, and probably as applied in this scenario wouldn't work the way we would intend in trying to put it together. So for all the reasons we've said, that's why I don't think the asset test is right. But I don't think the concern is wrong, and I don't, I think that's real. But I just don't think it works here. Not a good solution.
Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor of not having the asset test, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm opposed. Any abstentions? And it carries. Okay. What was number? Hold on.
Jeff, at some point I would like to add a topic for new business, but whenever you're ready to accept a motion on that,
We can do under any other business? You want to do it there? After the reports?
You want to do it? Okay, we can do it there.
Remind me down there. I think we're on new business. Ordinance revisions. Claire has been working, as you know, we've been working on ordinance revisions. We've got them back.
We should get Claire a seat at the table here.
I know. I was standing. I was just like, no, come back. Yes. So I have been working in conjunction with.
Closer to the mic, please.
I have been working in conjunction with our Yukon interns and Jeff Tinley and his legal intern to revise the ordinances. Most of them are about taking specific references to fees out and putting in that the fees are set by the Board of Selectmen and can be amended by the board. So that's what most of the ordinances are. And we also added a additional veterans exemption ordinance because there is currently not one in there. Revised the circuit breaker, and then we have a draft graffiti ordinance and pooper scooper for the dogs. So that's what we have so far. The only thing that's not complete is some capitalization issues, but we're working on that. I figured just send it to you guys because that's such a minor thing, so we'll get that done next week.
went through it and gave Betsy all the page numbers before the
Oh, no.
conversation.
I should have prefaced it that way. Very good job, Emily. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.
Can I just ask what the, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead, please.
what the background is for the draft graffiti ordinance and pooper scooper ordinance? It hasn't been discussed here up until we received it yesterday.
Oh, it
so I'm
hasn't?
just,
Oh,
no.
okay.
So I'm just,
Yeah,
something
that was
must have
on my
happened
list,
to bring that up.
Something bad happened.
Well, the graffiti was kind of mine because I was looking at a lot of other towns, and a lot of other towns did have graffiti ordinances. So I kind of took that on. I was like, oh, why not throw it in there, see what you guys think. The pooper scooper, though, I guess had been an issue with people cleaning up after their dogs, so they wanted to fix that in town.
Yeah, there is some concern about
Some talk about that.
our.
So has there been I guess, so there hasn't been a graffiti issue, or
No.
has there been a graffiti issue
There
in town?
was. Where, Betsy, the bridge?
Underpasses.
Okay.
Underpasses, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. As a matter of fact, that the bridge over the pump rug was an anti-graffiti material was put on that so that it wouldn't adhere to it.
The sticker I mentioned, that was mentioned, is graffiti. It was on a public, it was on a utility box.
Yeah, and the graffiti can be
All forms.
stickers,
Yep.
things,
Yeah, and so the next step of this project is to give you guys our recommended fee changes, since we did analysis of that as well. So this is the first step in getting all of the fees out and some other various changes.
I had one question on the circuit breaker match program, and I know that we changed that, saying that people have to be property owners from 3 years to 1 year. And it was at the last meeting, I think it was the meeting before that, we talked about this change. I think I raised the question, what are other towns doing? It seemed like this was perhaps more generous than those towns that were similar to us. I'm not sure that I really got that question answered. So
1
I'd like to
year
go
is
back to
more
that. Common.
much more common than 3 years is pretty unusual. I don't know if Bill's still on the line, but he has all the data on that. But when we researched it, we were kind of an outlier on
sounds
3
like he
years.
is.
Bill, are you still there?
I am here, and George, you're correct. Most towns have a 1-year resident requirement. A few have 2, an even smaller number have 3.
And when we say other towns, are these comparable towns or just other towns? I'm curious more about the other comparable towns.
Yeah, we looked at all 169, and I could dig, if you give me 2 minutes, I could probably dig out the benchmarks, but what we just discussed was accurate, and the vast majority, meaning I'm sure it's probably 80% of the towns, including surrounding towns, have a 1-year residency requirement.
If everyone else will indulge me, I would like to hear that. So I would appreciate if you'd spend the 2 minutes there.
So
All right, keep find it.
So again, I'm looking at this. On one side, I'm hearing, we're looking at what the other towns do, what do the average towns do, what do other towns do, we should do like them. Yet we are one of the most generous. We're not doing like other towns, we're doing more than other towns. Oxford dropped their their senior circuit breaker plus program when the state stopped funding the mandate. So again, we have a very generous program, one of the most generous in the state. We're not aligning ourselves. If we were to do that, we would not have a third enhanced program. We don't have to be like the other towns. Here, with having lived here for 3 years to get the program, I don't see anything wrong with that. Why, if people are moving here, and we have that program, it's always been 3 years, we should stay with 3 years.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Jeff. I'm just curious.
What's the rationale for, you have a senior comes to town, buys a condo at Heritage Village, they're gonna live there, lives here for a year. They're a Southbury resident, they're one of our seniors. So what's the rationale for making them wait 3 years. Like they're one of our seniors that we're trying to help, just like any other senior who's been here 3 years or 10 years or something like that.
Well, I would think that they should, if a senior was to move here, knowing their tax rate and what it is, that they would move here knowing they could pay taxes. You have, my feeling is that if you have had seniors who have been, anybody, paying your taxes, you've been paying for a number of years, and then you're looking for help because of a problem, I think that's appropriate, where just moving in and getting able to take advantage of a very enhanced senior tax relief. We've always had it at 3 years. It's been working fine at 3 years. We haven't had an issue. Frankly, I had somebody who came in, asked me why her taxes had gone up, and finally I dug into it for this young woman. It was an elderly woman, and I looked into it, and the problem was she had moved here, then applied for the program, but had not been here 3 years. And I explained to her that you really are supposed to be here 3 years. They really shouldn't have given you that program. And she was perfectly comfortable with it. She's okay, as long as I understand why, I can pay it, and that's not an issue. It's just, I just needed to know why, and that's the explanation, is the program, you have to be there, lived here for 3 years. So, I just felt, my feeling is the 3 years should stay. Or if you want to compromise and go to 2 years, I could understand that. But, Mike?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily a fan of a sort of a time in town being a barrier to entry. That said, I am curious as to, was the rationale of suggesting the change from 3 to 1, sort of to Jason's point, that, when you're here, so we should just change it for that reason. I'm just curious about was that the rationale, or was there another rationale for changing it from 3 to 1? Because I agree with it. It's been working. It's working. The old saying.
What I'm hearing from Bill Tolley was that that's what other towns do. So my question is, are we just going to do what other towns do, which we're not doing with the enhanced program, or are we going to look at this as a very generous program?
I beg to differ. That I was asked specifically what the benchmarks were for what other towns were doing, and I think I addressed that question. I don't have all the benchmarking statistics handy, but I can say that Woodbury does have a 3-year residency requirement. I'm looking at many other towns, Woodbridge. I mean, I have all 169 towns here. I just don't have the benchmark statistics tabulated, but part of our logic, not the main part of the logic, was looking at all 169 towns and what do? A few have 3, a few have 2, the vast majority have 1. That wasn't the logic that drove our recommendation. The logic that drove our recommendation was, if you're a senior and you have income issues, which is what an income-dependent senior circuit breaker program rests on, it's why the program is in place. Why is there an arbitrary waiting period for somebody who is in need? That was the logic.
Thank you, Bill.
There was also logic that these programs were going to be offset by PA 490, and that didn't quite work out. But, so, I mean, as far as that goes, I'm okay with the 1 year, but I just think that, again, we're asking taxpayers, to subsidize taxes for seniors, which is fine. I just think there should be some control over that. But it's on the ordinance as 1 year.
I really don't think anybody moves to Southbury to take advantage of our senior tax abatements. I mean, there's just not that much there to take advantage of. It's a program that we think we can afford. Southbury has run a very tight fiscal ship for literally decades, and we've put ourselves in a very good financial situation. And we can afford to be a little bit more generous than maybe some other towns, because we have run a tight fiscal ship for so long. So I'm okay with 1 year. I know the task force unanimously agrees on 1 year, so they're not gonna change their opinion, but if the board feels otherwise, then that's your prerogative. You can vote for 3.
Well, it's in on the ordinance as 1 year, so.
Well, you could be changed. I mean, it's-
Yeah, we went off the recommendation that was approved by the board, which changed it to 1 year, so that's why I changed.
Yeah. That's why it's in there.
What's the process we're utilizing to implement the other recommendation, which is the increase in the income limits?
I think it's just the assessor's office needs to make the policy change.
That's
You
just
don't
the
need an
policy.
ordinance
There's no
change.
ordinance
we-
involved.
Right, but do we need to pass a motion to do that? Or is the motion we passed last October
Oh, yes, so.
sufficient
I
to
think-
direct the assessor to do
I
that?
talked to the assessor and I think a resolution, they would like a resolution to be passed of when to implement it, the changes. So February 1st would be the correct time because that's when the applications start up again.
February 1st, applications are on the October 1, 2020 grand list?
Now I don't have it with me. The veterans, I think is they're
The
opposite.
veterans for 2021, I
2020 and
think.
2021, and I forget which is which. But
Just
they're
look.
different grand list years, the veterans and the seniors.
I think the point though too to this that Jeff's saying, and I agree with, and George to an extent too, we are more generous. We've run a tight ship, so that's helped us do a really good job. We're already being more generous than our neighboring towns and others in Connecticut. Now we hear Woodbury is also 3 years, so we're not dissimilar necessarily to our nearby communities, but we are because we're doing more than what they're doing. So, changing it from 3 to 1, I'm not as convinced. Maybe could be talked into splitting the difference here, but I think it's okay for us to have a little bit higher expectations because we are doing more than what the neighboring towns have done. And even those neighboring towns, sounds like some have 3-year limits as well, so.
I believe the next step in an ordinance process is we need to schedule a public hearing. Why don't we do that and hear from the public?
Sure.
And see what they have to say about changing it from 3 years to 1 year. And
If anybody wants to talk about it, we might not
Right.
get anybody there.
Or paper scooper,
we-
maybe they want to talk about that.
we haven't gotten, much public comment on ordinances we've done, but maybe this is the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do want to get the,
Just a note, you may all know this, but we did hold public hearings and heard from the public on all 3 of the programs. But of course, you guys are welcome to have more hearings.
We have to, Bill, under the charter.
Also, thank you.
okay. So I think the next step, this is out to the board. We said we get these out. So the next step would be to schedule public hearing on the changes to the ordinances. Most of these were, and we also have the fee changes.
Yes, the fee changes will be done after the ordinances get changed.
Right. That was one of the big things, was get our
Yeah.
fees adjusted.
Are we gonna have, so I had a question on that. If we pass the revised ordinances as is, then there's no longer any fees. So we kinda have to do it simultaneously.
Yes.
So are we gonna have a resolution for the next meet, or whenever, ordinance at the next meeting, we just have to have a public hearing.
Right.
But we're gonna need like the fee changes before we pass the ordinance, or we're gonna be left with without any fees.
Right, so I can get them to you before the next meeting. I'm mostly done with them. We just can't, we'd probably have to do it one right after another, like change the ordinances and then
Right.
change the fees right after.
At the same, I would do it at the same meeting.
Yeah, at the same time, yeah.
Yeah.
So I can
Yeah.
get that to you for next board meeting, no problem.
And then the only other question I had on the large ordinance document, which we can still schedule the public hearing, but some of the ordinances that we're revising in there, I saw subdivision regulations, aquifer protection, and I think zoning, which my understanding is those regulations need to be amended by those bodies. So I think we need to get some clear, unless there's some exception when it comes to fees, like I don't know. So I think we need some clarity from Jeff Tinley on that,
Okay.
on whether we can amend those aspects.
All right, send an email on that, so we got that clarified, and we'll do that. Anything else on that? We're good? Okay, we'll,
Did you set a public hearing date or
oh,
no?
we have to set a public hearing date. Okay.
Or do you want Jeff Tinley to get an answer there first?
We're gonna,
I think we can schedule the public hearing. If his answer is we can't change those, then we just don't approve those changes. I think that's the way that would work. We wouldn't be able to add changes after you'd have to have another public hearing if you're gonna materially change something, you notice to the town, then, but if you're not gonna change something, you wouldn't have to have another public hearing.
so should we set a date for a public hearing on which ordinances?
How many ordinances are we changing? Or adding? Sorry, Claire.
We're adding the veterans, possibly the graffiti and the dog ordinance. The other ones are edited language.
How many?
It's just a change in the language.
I don't have the exact count, but I can get it to you. Because there are a lot.
Yeah. See that.
It's only a 500-page document.
I'll read it. I'll read it at lunch tomorrow.
Found all of the capitalism.
Well, we have to have the, in order to do this public hearing, would we also have to have the, the fees are gonna be? Do we have to change that do we have to have that in the ordinance, or can we just set the fees as a board?
The way the draft amendments read, we're not putting any fees in the ordinance. We're
It's just
making
set
it
by
all
the board.
subject to Board of Selectmen resolution.
Right, that's what I'm saying. We wouldn't have to have,
Put that in.
we don't have to put it in in the discussion of the ordinance. We don't have to put in the fee.
Correct.
Correct, we just do a resolution on the fee. Okay, so we don't have to, we can just do that's what I'm getting at. We can just do the ordinance itself. We just have to have the fees ready to go as a resolution right after.
I assume Jeff Tinley's looked at all these already?
Yes.
Because that would be the only hesitation. Okay, so
I
he's,
will ask him about those.
yeah, that's
After,
just
yeah.
a sort of side question. Okay, because that would be the only thing in my mind that would cause a little hesitation. If he hadn't looked at these yet, then I would wait to the next meeting, but since he has, I think we could set the public hearing.
So, there's the $6 million question. Setting a public hearing.
How do you publish all this?
How long do we have to publish it?
To get it in prior to the meeting, I have to get it in next Wednesday's paper, and we're gonna have it on October 1st.
Next Wednesday, the 23rd, it has to be in the paper.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
It's be no less than 5 days, no more than 15.
Well, that means you'd have to submit it by Friday, tomorrow. Talking about voices?
I have to have everything ready tomorrow.
Right.
Just Republican American.
so that's okay. So I'm just looking,
Would it be easier administratively if we have the public hearing on October 15th, given the volume of ordinances we're talking
yeah,
about?
that's what I'm just trying to figure out. As you know, there's the elections and some other things. October So you're saying have the, okay, I see what you're saying. That's the second, that's the second meeting of the month. We'll do it before the selectmen's meeting. Or do you want to do it at a separate public hearing? And then,
There's no reason not to.
I think it could be at 7 o'clock, like at the beginning of the, like the way we do town
Yeah, we
meetings.
do, yeah.
yeah, that's fine. I just,
Is that the,
okay.
that's the way we usually do it.
So let's set the public hearing for October 15th at, do you want to do it at 6:30 or 7 o'clock?
I think we're saying do it at 7.
That's fine. I just wonder.
Yeah.
At 7 p.m., as long as nobody's objecting or wants to get started early. Okay. Public hearing for the purpose of hearing from the public about the changes to the ordinances. I'll entertain that motion.
Make a motion.
Second?
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, and it carries. So it will be October 15th, the public hearing. That should give enough time, and the ordinances, and we can get this wrapped up.
On the circuit breaker, back to the discussion of giving direction to the assessor. So my understanding is, based on our prior motion, he has everything he needs, except he needs to make us a motion about the implementation date. Is that? Claire's
That's
nodding.
correct, Claire?
So
Yeah.
we just need to pass a motion saying effective on the 10/1/20 grand list, the committee's recommendation should be implemented by the assessor. Is
That's
that-
all I think we need.
Tonight? Oh, okay.
You wrote the motion?
I have it like for next meeting. I can get it.
Okay, for the next,
Okay.
so we'll have that
That's
on the
fine,
next.
because the application period is until February, so.
Yeah.
For the
Okay.
next, yeah, okay, so already for the next meeting, okay. We're all right with that, we'll move on. The grant, this is to discuss the, have you seen, we sent the grant out?
Yeah,
We're
this
also,
afternoon we got it.
we're going to, this is the, from Mylona McBroom. You know, we did a pedestrian study. There were recommendations in there. We took a look at it. There's a grant coming up. We want to get in on it. I just want to be clear about something that, the Board of Finance will be looking at this on Monday, basing their recommendation to, do the grant or not do what we're supposed to do with them. Wanted to bring it to the board so we can get the grant application in on time. There's two separate pieces. One is that we think we can get in with the money that will be available for the grant, which is the traffic lights and a sidewalk that goes down to the library. And for Mylona McBroom to do this application and get it in, proposing is $3,500. And then we can, that'll get started on the application. Any questions? Like I said, this is part of our pedestrian study and get our walkability more. I mean, there's a whole list on the pedestrian study will be coming up. We're not going to, obviously, we're not going to do everything that's in there. We don't have the money to do everything. But this is something we can accomplish.
So the grant would go towards the construction costs related to those upgrades that
Yes.
are recommended?
Yes. One of which is the traffic lights that over by the Southbury Green and the movie theater area. Excuse me. It's, you know, it's difficult to cross there for pedestrians.
Sure. The language in the memo stated that certain costs would still keep going down, I think, actually, right?
Exclusions.
Yeah, there were certain costs that would still have to be covered by the town that wouldn't be covered by the grant. Go back up. I have to find it. There was, keep going. The town understands that the maximum amount is 600,000 for construction activities, and that the town would have to fund design and engineering services separately. Do we have any sense even of the range of that?
No.
The design and engineering services? Okay. Yeah, no, this makes, I mean, this grant money. I would
Yeah.
say we should be going for it.
What is the deadline for this grant to be submitted?
It's, Claire, when's the deadline for this? I think it's in, yeah, I'm gonna say it's pretty close, that's the
When in
problem.
October? And then my follow-up will be, how long does Malone and McBroom estimate that it will take them to complete this? And what I just want to get at is that we don't have a public presentation on this until September 30th. So perhaps it would be nice to have the public hear this safety portion first and what they have put together prior to us agreeing to put a grant out.
Well, we can't do anything until we can't accept the grant.
I'm not even talking about accepting, I'm saying applying. Spending $3,500 until we hear what the public has to say based on the presentation. And that's where those deadlines are kind of critical.
Like I said, this is to get the grant application in. That's what this is, to get it filled out.
I understand.
Yeah, your point is the $3,500.
But if the public's completely against all of it, then there's no sense in spending the $3,500 and submitting for a grant.
I did scan through that presentation. It's available on the planning site. I mean, there's some things in there that look reasonable. Some look like a real stretch, probably can't afford. But I would imagine there's at least a couple items in there that we want to do, we could afford, and the 600 would certainly help.
Well, that's why those two projects are picked out, because they're two projects. Number one, as Mylona McBroom pointed out, you've already done your study. You already know, you have a strategic plan that you want to increase walkability and pedestrian walking on Main Street. We are getting constant complaints about getting across the traffic light, getting across. We're getting complaints about that. And we have sidewalks, which is part of the report from Mylona McBroom. We have a sidewalk from Main Street that comes down and then ends, and it stops there. It seems pretty logical to, if there's a grant available, that we can get those things done. We don't know when these grants are going to come back around. And these are, according to Mylona McBroom, in the cost range of that grant. Some of the other stuff that they're proposing, or you could do, which is raised islands and all the safety areas, it's pretty expensive, and I don't think the grant would. And then you get into your snow removal and issues like this. So this is part of what they came up with and recommended, and I don't think this is an extravagant thing to do, which is the lights, the crossing and the lights, and that sidewalk. I don't think this is a.
I
we
would
need
just
to
say
get
that if the application fee was $35,000, I would share Emily's concern. But I would remind us all that we've spent quite a bit more than $3,500 over the last month or so on other issues that the town has not weighed on yet.
And
This is a direct,
sorry.
it's a direct effect on public safety, perhaps. So I think it's okay.
I don't disagree with you and that thought. I'm just saying if we could accomplish both, and that's where I'm asking about the deadlines. If we can't, then yes, I agree. This is probably something that's, if it's imminent and we can't accomplish both at the same time, then we move forward. But if we can do both, then why not? So that's where I asked the question.
Is there any advantage to getting your grant in sooner rather than later, as far as getting?
Well, there's a deadline.
Usually not.
But it's
So-
not like a first
Unless
come,
I don't
first
think
serve.
doesn't sound like a
they're
rolling grant.
So they need to put this together to get the application together. There's got to be some time for that. So
it's a relatively small amount of money that we'd put out for a relatively large amount of money in return, so I think we could go ahead
And I think that, to be clear, I'm not concerned about the $3,500. I'm saying, well, unless we hear from the public and hear what they feel like the priorities should be, perhaps it's different than what we would be submitting for in the grant.
The trouble with the other priorities is they're very expensive, a lot more than what the grant's gonna be. So that would leave us out of being able to use this grant. Or we would have to come up,
And how long did they estimate that they need to prepare the application?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I have to look
Okay.
at the email.
What was the date? I didn't hear it.
October 16th. The deadline.
October,
16th.
yeah, so that, you know,
It's less than a month away.
Yeah.
well, yeah, and they've gotta work on it. So it came up, made aware of it,
You need a motion to approve the grant?
I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the $3,500 grant application fee.
I'll second.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? It carries, thank you. All right, we'll quickly go through this. George, let's get through my report down and I'll call any other business.
Okay.
As you know, I'll just tell you that a lot of people there's a lot of talk about playing football, and CIAC has decided not to play football. So there's some people emailing, you've gotten some of this information. I've talked to Michael Ganem about this. Our policy is to follow CIAC rules and regulations through Park and Rec for playing like this. However, they're talking about practicing or wanting to practice or whatever. We're not talking about games. That's CIAC about getting together, play games. There is a permitting process for use of our fields that Park and Rec follows. They follow this process, and it includes insurance. They have to have it basically has to be an organized group. They have to have, and the word escapes me, they have to have their bylaws and some other things in order to get a permitted use of a field, like if you're a soccer team or whatever. And Michael's going to let them know that. But I also want to remind that if people use our parks and they want to be in our parks not permitted, they have a right to use our parks. And it's the organized side of it that requires a permit. So I've left that back to Michael to get a hold of these people. We have a process in place. We have guidelines, and if they meet those guidelines, they will, I don't see anything wrong. Practice is one thing, and I don't know what practicing means, but I would assume practicing is not full contact, but we're working on that.
Hey Jeff, are there any liability waivers with the process?
Well, they have to have
to
insurance if
protect
they're going to get a
to
permit.
protect the town from
Right.
someone gets hurt, or whether they get hurt or whether they get sick,
Right. So we're going to stick to the process. There's a reason why these things are put in place over time. We cannot, it's not right for us, because if we deviate from the process for one group, we're going to have to deviate for all of them, and it gets very murky. And so we're going to go steady on the course. If they can do what we do for the other teams, that's fine. But again, if people are in one of our parks enjoying themselves, doing whatever, it's not a permitted activity, and I'll leave it at that. I don't know if anybody knows this, the tennis courts, if you've been watching at Community House, I think they are done now. Dan Colton has been keeping close track of that. So I think they're done now. They're going to then move on to Ballantine. They wanted to make sure that we had the tennis courts available. They didn't tie them all up at the same time. And they'll be going over to Ballantine, and weather should be okay. We should be getting that. And they're going to do then go back and they're going to a patch and repair on the basketball courts at Community over there. And then they're going to go to Ballantine, and the basketball court down there, they're going to do an overlay of pavement and repair, get those squared up. I will, I want, this board to know there's a commitment to our park and rec and our fields and our courts and stuff. And I did, when the COVID hit, I told Park and Rec it's in the budget, get everything in place, get all the bids, be ready to go. If our tax collection shows that we're doing okay, then I want to move on these courts. And so they are doing that. Our attorney has reviewed the employee handbook. We'll be sending that out first to the department heads to get a little input from them and any comments, and then we'll be bringing it to the board. I guess our attorney has been pretty busy, so not with us. He's been pretty busy. I do want to make a note that we've not received the official letter, but Joan Gillespie is resigning from the Board of Finance, and I do want to recognize that she has given many years of great service on that Board of Finance, and we do appreciate her work there, and I will extend that on behalf of the board, which I think Kathy DeCarly will, well, that's the recommendation. Anyway, we met with the radio refresh and all the chiefs of all the emergency departments. We hope to have pretty soon 3 different options and cost estimates on those 3 options. It's a little complicated, but we're getting closer with the radio refresh. Any questions? I will say that be ready for that radio refresh because it's not as inexpensive as we might have thought.
We never thought it was inexpensive.
I thought it was a big number.
So it's like it's not even that inexpensive.
Before we get into George's new business, I just wanted to thank our Board of Ed candidates who I know are very patiently waiting, and we're running behind schedule, so much appreciated.
We're sorry. Okay. Reports from liaison, George.
Okay, we did have a road study committee meeting today. They're doing the work on roads. There's a lot less chip sealing done this year than we expected because of the storm, and also I guess COVID got in the way. I think we only did about 4.5 miles of chip sealing, but they've kind of innovated a new process. They call it double chip seal, where they put down a layer of the asphalt, then a layer of, I think, the 3/8 stone, then another layer of asphalt, and then a top coat of 1/4-inch stone. And they were able to refurbish a road. It was like Oak Manor.
Yeah, it was pretty thin. They overlaid it with asphalt and then did this double chip.
Yeah, so they were able, that road they estimated was at 0 remaining life. I think the remaining service life on that road was pretty much used up. But by doing that, at a much lower cost than a full mill and pave or reconstruction, they think they actually got a usable road out of it that's almost like as good as new. So that could be exciting. I don't know if they're going to, we talked a lot about double chip sealing, and I get all excited about things like that. Jeff does, but I'm sure the rest of the board and the public could care maybe a little less than less. Bridges, there's a couple of you were at the meeting, Jeff.
So let me just say, again, the chip sealing. We've done it. There was a lot of resistance to the chip sealing in the beginning. People didn't understand it. And this board stuck with the process as much as difficult It was, and now I think we're seeing that people are accepting the chip sealing as a good process. When it's finished, it's been fine tuned. So this is really making a difference to the town's roads and frankly to our budget. So I appreciate the board sticking with the calls about how nasty the chip sealing is, and we're doing pretty well with it. Go ahead, George.
The fog sealing process, there's about, well, the 4.5 miles that were chip sealed are gonna get fog sealed over, starting like tomorrow. I think they're gonna do that. There was one road got reconstructed, but I can't, do you remember which one it was? No, I can't either. Couple of bridges involved. I don't think there's any big bridge projects that are gonna happen like next year. Am I wrong about that?
I hope not.
Doesn't look like, yeah, unless one falls down,
Nope.
the one on Old Waterbury Road is sort of in the works, but that has to be reviewed by like the Army Corps of Engineers and also the DEEP, so that's a whole rigmarole there. The remaining service life average of our roads jumped up from about 13.5 to 14.2, which, you know, we were hoping it would be up to like 16 or so. This is based on the iWorks drive around survey. So, but it is better. Basically with roads, you're on a treadmill. You're constantly doing work, you're doing chip sealing, you're resurfacing, and you think, gee, I really got much better roads, but every year you lose a year on all your roads. So the net result is that you're running hard on a treadmill, and you're not really getting ahead too quickly. I don't think I have anything else on roads. IT committee, we did meet. The IT committee met with the new IT director, David Richards. He did come to the last meeting. He got a pretty good earful about everything's going on. Thankfully, Ray's still here to help with the transition. I think he's scheduled to start on the 23rd. 22nd,
I got
23rd.
someone starting the 21st, and I think the 22nd, but could be the 21st.
So it'd be next week. He should be here. But that was, IT committee was mainly just to give him an update on everything that's going on, and there's a lot going on. Police radio upgrade, Jeff covered that. Cellular mobile coverage, we are waiting, I guess, for an opening to get Joe Ruggiero in here to talk about his work. I keep waiting to see that on the agenda whenever Jeff's ready to kick it off. SPC, we did have a meeting. They are ready to present on their affordable housing plan, Kat Smith and Ron Conti. So whenever you can schedule that into an agenda, they say they're ready. And they are also still hoping that 2 new members to fill their vacancies will magically appear. Edgewood Committee, really, well, it's all executive session. And the Energy Task Force, there was no activity. That's it for me, guys.
Justin?
Economic Development was supposed to meet yesterday. The meeting was on, then it was off. Then it was tried to be called again. Didn't have a quorum. Apparently we're going to have a special meeting next week. Nothing new from IPOC. The Senior Commission did meet yesterday afternoon for the first time since February. It was a good meeting. I think we all got the notes from it today. There was a couple people in public comment, one of whom was the resident service coordinator for elderly housing in charge of Grace Meadows 3, 4, and Bernhardt Meadows. The concern is raised that the Energy Assistance Program and food bank apps are going to be due in October. And obviously we still don't have social services director. So that was something that came up and has come up in some other electronic communications as well. Obviously we have a lot to do tonight, but maybe we could chat about that at our next meeting a little bit and see where we are with that. And that's it.
Maybe the person who was coming in fell ill. And I won't get into the details, but should be okay. All right. Jason?
I did not have any meetings. Either they were canceled or it's not their regular meeting, so.
Emily?
EMS committee meets in 2 weeks, and unfortunately, I had a conflict and wasn't able to attend library, so nothing for me.
Mike?
Parks and Rec has not met since our last meeting. Planning met, I was not there because we were in Board of Education interviews on Monday, but it was a pretty full agenda. Just a notice, and Emily mentioned one of them earlier, there is a public hearing on September 30th for the pedestrian safety study, and there is another public hearing on October 20th with two items of discussion, the amendment to the subdivision regulations specific to guardrails, all of our favorite topics, and the petition for designation of scenic road status for the portion of Jeremy Swamp Road from Wholesale, the dirt portion from Wholesale to the Southbury Oxford town line. Region 15 also met on Monday, but I was here, as I said. But the primary part of that agenda was an update from the superintendent on school reopenings in COVID, and so far, you know, it's not never perfect, but I think we really owe a debt of gratitude to our teachers, our administrators, and most importantly, kids and their parents and guardians for really doing an extraordinary job as we get the kids back to school and hopefully stay healthy.
Okay. Is there any other business?
Yeah, I'd like to raise a topic that is not typically in my wheelhouse, but it's been brought to my attention that there's a lot of concern about the level of hatred and divisiveness going on right now in our political world. And I was contacted by several citizens a week and a half ago, and these folks were quite unhappy. And they asked me what I could do. And I thought about it, and I thought about it. And I came up with a resolution, and I had some help on it. I'm not the only person that worked on it. But I'd like to throw it on the screen if I could.
Betsy just popped right up.
Yeah, how do I send it to you, Betsy?
You'll have to email it to me.
Okay. See if I can find it. And your email is just Betsy? Select 3, okay. There you are.
I see that.
Oh, the old,
Make sure George doesn't have any
Yep,
viruses
no
he's
viruses.
sharing. Get a little Jeopardy music
Got
playing.
folk music.
There we go.
I can read this if you like. I call it a resolution against hatred and bigotry. And it pains me to have to do this, but I don't know any other way to deal with this issue. Whereas Selectman Rosen has repeatedly referred to Southbury as a racist and bigoted community in public comments, he states that we should publicly acknowledge that Southbury has a racism and bigotry problem. Whereas Selectman Rosen has insisted that the town apologize to our black and brown residents and students present and past for failing to previously and adequately acknowledge the problem and failing to stand up for them. Whereas Selectman Rosen also stated that the town should establish with advice of council and in partnership with the Southbury Diversity Committee, one strike and you're out policies for any Region 15 town employee or committee member who is found to use racist or bigoted language. Whereas Selectman Rosen's recent posts on social media have attracted many comments that are hateful and attack many people, yet he has failed to delete or condemn them. Whereas Selectman Rosen has also allowed posts by others on his social media accounts that make unsupported and vile accusations of bigotry and racism against other elected officials and citizens of Southbury. Whereas copies of these posts are available and can be provided if necessary. Whereas there are many lawn signs posted around town stating that hate has no home here, and we are fully supportive of that statement. Whereas hateful statements can provoke and encourage hatred and anger in others, resulting in violent acts against law enforcement, private citizens, and property. Whereas Selectman Rosen, by way of silence, has condoned acts of violence against members of the Southbury community and continues to associate and actively participates with members of a group who align and associate themselves with BLM, a known violent and hate-filled organization. Whereas board members have received numerous complaints regarding the bigoted nature of Selectman Rosen's posts and comments. And I resolve that the Southbury Board of Selectmen denounces all hateful speech and rhetoric. Indeed, hate should have no home in our town. We hereby reprimand and censure Selectman Rosen for his statements, his hypocrisy, and for his sponsorship of the bigoted and hateful speech of others. And it was hard to write that, but after reading some of the posts, I just don't see any other way. I don't think an elected official in town should be posting those kinds of things about people that are, they're just vile and nasty. I mean, it goes after so many people. It goes after Jeff, it went after my wife, it goes after Jeff's brother. It paints a lot of Jeff's supporters as being, nasty, racist, bigoted people. And people are just fed up with it. I got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. And people are complaining to me from town about it. And I felt something had to be done. I don't know what else we could do. But this is something that I feel is necessary, unfortunately.
I empathize with you significantly. I've received similar remarks, similar outrage from citizens of this community. I'll say I personally have significantly struggled over these past few months with conversation, comments, activities that I've seen and heard in our town. It's been implied that I'm a racist, that other members of this board are racists. Mike, you've said that we have a racism problem, that this town is full of racists. I have a problem with that. I really do. Other people in this town have a problem with that. I don't think that it's fair to paint the town in that light, and I think that, is exactly as somebody said tonight, the more we continue to say that this is a racist town that's led by racist people, are we not attracting those people to come to our town? Are we not going to create that exact problem? I don't condone hate. I don't condone racism. I'm not a racist. My friends are not racist. I'm outraged personally.
I frankly don't know any racists in town. If there are any, I wish they'd come forward and wave their arms and address themselves, because I don't know who they are.
Our role...
I will say there was a comment that was brought to my attention, and I'll call it out, Jason Goodsmith. And it is Jeff Manville tied to this hate group? I am sure his brother Dwayne is, and then it keeps going on. I run into comments from Ruby O'Neill that there's still anti-Semitism on my part. And I think that was proven to be not true, though the board at the time was going to investigate me. And then, frankly, when it was shown it wasn't, pretty much in a report by a reporter, it wasn't true, I was left out there with no investigation to come to that conclusion. The board dropped it at that time. And now there's comments about my brother, who is a police officer, one of the longest police officers here in Southbury. And in fact, I know he's not, and it's my brother, but not brought up to be racist at all. And I don't think anybody, but it's out here. Mike?
So, thank you for bringing this to light, George. I appreciate it, and I believe you when you say that it was difficult to write. I want to clarify some things, because there's been a lot of public comment, which protocol is not to respond to public comment over time, and I'm not going to respond to anyone's specific comments, nor would I name specific citizens at the table, because similar to how we have personnel decisions behind closed doors, I think it's inappropriate to call out specific citizens on comments on my public page. I think it's also important to none of those comments were me. I've never once called anyone at this table or accused anyone at this table of being racist. I never actually said that Southbury has let me clarify the quote that was said last June at the first rally that was organized by kids in town to support Black Lives Matter movement. I said Southbury has a racism and bigotry problem like every other town in America. That was the full quote. And I do believe it does. And I've shared my experiences over the almost 6 years, now that 5 of us have worked together, of extraordinary anti-Semitism that my family has experienced in this town. And if you speak to Rabbi Polikoff, he could share stories of tons of other members of our synagogue who have experienced anti-Semitism. That does not mean that all of Southbury are anti-Semitic. I've never said that. I've never said that all of Southbury is racist. I've said, though, that like every town in America, and this is a conversation our entire country is having, there is, and I believe it, and I respect those who don't believe it. I disagree with them, but I respect them. I believe that this nation has a systemic racism problem. All right. So I want to be some specific points here that are that have been brought up. The post in question that was discussed earlier tonight was about masks. That was my post. It was a picture that I took. I was at that event, right? It was a picture that I took, and I said, wear a mask. It's the American thing to do. That's what I wrote. That was the post. Nothing racist about that post. I didn't post anything underneath that, right? I didn't post. At that rally, I did hear folks on the other side, the counter protesters from that rally, they were mainly young people, not all young people, but mainly young people. They were using bad language, right? They were using the F word, towards it. And those on the other side, and I heard it with my own ears, and it wasn't those in the photos, because the photo wasn't about anything racism, it was about wearing a mask. I heard 3 instances of people using the N-word with my own ears, right? I didn't call out who it was. I never did. I said it, I heard it. And I had one young woman come up to me after the event at the next day, because there was the other side was at Playhouse Corner on the Sunday. At that event, a woman came up to me and told me exactly what she heard. I said, I heard it. I heard it. The N-word was used towards her, and go home. That's what was word. I heard it with my own ears. She confirmed it when she came up to me. At that same event, though, the next day, I said, I will, just as loudly as I will defend the Black Lives Matter movement's right to peaceful protest, as we've been doing in this town. And the crime that was referred to was a young, stupid kid, right, who I coached soccer when this kid was 9 years old in Southbury soccer, grabbed a sign from the rally and started running away and stupid. He regrets it. Stupid. It wasn't violent. Grabbed the sign and ran. So that I just want to make sure that
He also used a false name. It was a criminal.
But yes, that's fine.
And evaded police.
Intending to get someone else.
It was a stupid thing that he regrets. All right, and so I agree with that. No one condones that. No one condones that. And even if you see, there are other comments, not mine, where people said, we can't do that. You can't do that. But what I said at the rally the Sunday after that all happened was I said to a group of protesters who were there for the Black Lives Matter movement, I said, I will defend the right of those who had been there on Saturday, including, I think you were all there, yeah, to their First Amendment right. I will do it just as loudly as I will for anyone else. Just as loud. But what I won't do is stand for hate and bigotry. And there can those who believe it doesn't exist in this town. When I first was quoted in the paper, because the paper. That's where this all started. The Rep AM ran a story the next day after that event, or 2 days after that event in June, and said Mike Rosen said that Southbury has a racism and bigotry problem. It didn't include the ... like every other town in America does. It's on video, so you could see it. And so I got phone calls. I got phone calls from people I respect who have known me, I've worked with on this town, other commissions, and they said, "Do you really think that?" And I said, "Well, I know it, because I've been getting letters and emails, and just, you know, I'm a little disappointed that this was, I mean, clearly this was a coordinated, ambush type of effort, and I get it. All right, there are those who wish to, and I am not one of them. People will say it is. Racism isn't political. There are Democrats who are racists and bigots and anti-Semites. There are Republicans. There are independents. All right, racism knows no political creed. But there are those who wish to politicize it. I'm not one of them. I love Southbury. I chose to move here 11 years ago. And I've experienced hate myself and my family, and I have friends and family have. But I've received emails. And I asked Jeff this week on Tuesday. I emailed you. I believe I copied Betsy and Norina too, saying I'd like to put back on the agenda an update on the conversation we had earlier this summer on the climate around race in Southbury. All right? Your response was, well, if they can contact me, share it with me. And I said, well, this specific individual wants to remain anonymous because they, and I'm not going to use their gender because I want to protect their anonymity, they fear reprisal. They fear reprisal. They still live in town. They love this town. And at our next meeting, I hope we can continue the conversation, and I will share that with you. But it was painful to read. And I've received, over the course of the summer, I've asked people to share those stories with me. So at some point I could share. We've had a lot going on, and I didn't want this to get caught up in the political climate. You know, the comments that we're talking about on Facebook were from August 15th. So it's a month since then. I really haven't been online on Facebook since August 15th. I haven't commented on any of those Citizens of Southbury groups that I know George and I both have gone down that rabbit hole at times of getting involved there. I used to engage much more frequently because you can't have rational conversations. You can't. You can't have rational conversations. And I have not been divisive. I've been speaking my truth. I've never called anyone here racist. Never. And Jeff, when your issue came up 2 years ago, whenever it was, we actually did take action. We issued a statement that I wrote on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. Emily wasn't part of the board at that time. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen that I wrote, right, on our behalf, that everyone approved, that said there's no evidence, pretty much. There was a statement.
Said there was no venue to investigate.
There was no, right? But I also was asked during the conversation we had, right, I defended you. I said, I've never experienced anything anti-Semitic from Jeff, right? I did. I defended you. Because if I don't have it, I'm not going to just take someone's word for it. And I wasn't there, right, in that situation. So I think I have demonstrated that I'll take a pretty rational, clear point of view. And if people in this town, similar to you're saying, some people say, I've never experienced it, I've never experienced it. I had someone call me saying, call me after I said that is, I've never experienced racism in this town. And I said, well, you're white. Why would you experience racism in this town? And I shared 2 or 3 stories that I had been told that people had contacted me on, who are black and brown residents of our town, who shared their experiences. Even those folks who have experienced racism, most of them, except this one person I'm talking about, they still love this town. They believe in this town. And that's why they're there on Sundays, by the way. They believe in this town, just like those who were there the Saturday before believe in this town. They believe in this country. All right? So it's not being divisive or trying to be political when I say that I believe, based on the stories I've heard from people, right, and the experiences people have shared with me and my own family's experiences, that Southbury has a racism and bigotry problem like every other town in this nation. Because it is a scourge. The hatred that's out there right now. It's why when I saw that sticker, and I'm the one who took that picture too, I saw that sticker on the utility box. Patriot Front is the Anti-Defamation League, the Southern Poverty Law Center, all these groups who I respect, some may not, right? They are a known hate group. right? Now, you could say that your point of view is that Black Lives Matter is a hate group. They are not considered that by the FBI. They are not considered that by the ADL. They are not considered. But don't get me wrong.
Can
There
go
were the
online,
wait.
watch
But
videos
let's not.
and tell
But
me
let's not
that's-
conflate.
That's love.
Let's not
saying that.
conflate, which many do, the Black Lives Matter movement, who believe in the very basic notion that Black lives in America should matter as much as all other lives. And the research is relatively clear. You can agree you can agree with it or not, but I believe the research is relatively clear that they haven't been treated as equals. That black and brown residents haven't been. Their lives have not mattered as much in America. Now, you can disagree with that statement. That's fine. You have a right to disagree with that statement. But the Black Lives Matter movement is a decentralized movement. Black Lives Matter, there are members of that organization, of the actual organization that started, that is called Black Lives Matter, that I vehemently disagree with. There's anti-Semitic rhetoric in some of that movement. But what you're seeing on that street corner, there is no such thing, by the way, as BLM Southbury. Doesn't exist. Simply doesn't exist. There's a group they've dubbed themselves Justice Southbury now, that supports the concept, simple concept, that Black lives matter, right? They don't support violence, just like you shouldn't judge. I support our police. I have a very good relationship with our local police. I don't believe we should be defunding the police, by the way. I don't support that. But do I believe that there is a problem with policing? Yeah, I do. Do I think that there is systemic racism in policing? I believe there's systemic racism in every institution in this country. So of course it's in policing, right? So of course it's in policing. And I think there are ways to improve policing. I think most police think there's a way to improve policing. But just as we shouldn't judge police by the behavior of its worst officers, because there are those who are bad, right? You shouldn't judge those who believe in the concept that Black lives should matter by the worst behavior of folks who are rioters and looters, and who should be brought to justice, right? Who should be brought to justice. So I just want, I'm grateful for those who spoke up, and public, you have every right to speak up. And I apologize that I didn't blur out your face in that picture, because it wasn't about you, Shauna. I was making a statement that our leader should wear a mask. Because even on our website, there's a picture of you that says, wear a mask. Wear a mask. It's the right thing to do, or whatever it is. So I really was saying that. So, and regarding, Greg, thank you for speaking also. The reason I posted as I did was that's where I found it. It wasn't meant to be. That's where I found it. I was there. I found it. I took the picture. So people think I have some agenda, and I'm a communications person, yes, and I know how to do social media. But my intent, with everything I talk about on racism in this town and bigotry in this town, is to, as I've done on a lot of issues, to engage in the conversation, to try to get people to listen. It's very hard. It's very hard, and especially because on a national level, our political leaders are just insane on both sides of the aisle. All right? They're yelling and screaming at each other. They're not listening to each other. Generally, and even on that same chain that was printed out here about the wear a mask, someone who doesn't live in town, who's a former work colleague of mine from years ago, said, is that the leader of your town? Here's what they said. And I'm going to read it because it's here. And I'm sorry to our board of ed candidates who are sitting here going along. But this is a really important conversation. Someone wrote, and I apologize, I feel bad that you have to serve on the same board as that guy. Doesn't know you, lives in Massachusetts, doesn't know you. And here's what I wrote in response. He cares about our town. His family's lived here for generations. We actually have agreed more than we've disagreed, as most town issues aren't based on political affiliation, just as wearing a mask should not be a political issue. That was my comment. All right? So I've never once called anyone here a racist, and I've never specifically called anyone in town a racist, nor said that Southbury is racist. Southbury is a wonderful town. I love this town. We need to confront the issues that our residents are telling us they're experiencing. Now, they may not be speaking to everybody here, so you may not know or feel that there's a racism problem or bigotry problem in town. And I can't talk about racism because I'm white, right? That there is. But I can tell you that I've heard from many residents who say there is a problem, that they've experienced it. By the way, many of those have also said are young people. They've never experienced any issues with our police. They felt fortunate about that. At that June rally where I was quoted at, young person came up and said, You know, I've never felt profiled by police in our town. I've always had a good relationship. But I've been followed by managers in the supermarket, right? The N-word's been used against me. One of them was called Zebra Boy. So I struggle with the fact that, just as I struggle with the fact that people respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter. Anyone who believes in Black Lives Matter believes that all lives matter. They just want Black lives to matter equally. That's it. It's not a hard concept. So I struggle when people say that. But, you know, I do apologize to anyone who I've offended or who feel I'm trying to divide, because it's actually just the opposite of what I'm trying to do. My point is to make Southbury a better town. I love this town. That's why I've served both on Parks and Rec before here and here. I love it. Deeply love it. And I just want it to be better. And I want us to acknowledge everyone who lives here. And that's not a political thing. In this case, it's about, it is about black and brown neighbors. So, thanks.
Mike, I want to be clear. In that quote, you say Southbury has a racism problem just like so many other places across the country. Not every place across the country. You're limiting that. So to me, as I read that, you're saying Southbury has a racism problem like other places, but not all of them, so it's limited, which is saying that it's exclusive to Southbury. I take issue with that. And the biggest thing to me that I have a problem with is the hypocrisy there. You sit here and you call out Jeff and say he's not wearing a mask, he's socially distanced, he's taking that precaution, that's following the executive orders. Yet someone shared with me a picture of you at another protest or peaceful protest at another event where you weren't wearing a mask. You were next to someone, you were socially distanced. So again, hypocrisy, I take issue with that. The biggest thing to me, though, that I see within this is that on your Facebook page, which has been shared with me, correct, you're absolutely right. I'm not saying that you have said these statements or that you are the one who's coming out and blatantly putting it out there, but it's on your page. You're perpetuating it by not disagreeing with it. So you're saying hate has no home in Southbury. We shouldn't have hate here. Yet there's hate on your personal social media page, and you're not saying anything against it. Someone's saying that Dwayne Manville is a part of Patriot Front. He's a bad hombre, and you don't sit there and say, no, that's not true. All of those other instances throughout that, and you're saying, no, it's not true. So to me, is guilty by association? Are you saying by silence that you're accepting this? You're not publicly coming out like you say you did for Jeff and you're so proud of. You're not doing that for one of our own town employees. I've got a problem with that as a leader of our town.
Can I, Jeff, respond? And I know I don't want to belabor this too much, but I'll belabor it as much as we need to so actual facts come out. One, and this can get into a he said, she said, the photo you're referencing, which I know who shared it with you because it was posted on social media, was me speaking at an event in June where I took my mask off to speak, wiped the megaphone that I had, put it on immediately after. At the event that I was at, the pro police rally on that Saturday, that photo was taken at, the overwhelming majority of people were not wearing masks and weren't social distancing. I was there. I was watching from a distance.
But we're not.
So wait. Let me finish. You made a point. Let me finish, Emily. All right. So regarding comments on my page, we've all been on these various crazy pages, Citizens of Southbury Buzz, you name it, whatever the groups are. And anytime someone comments something, but then somebody deletes it, other people are like, censorship. Which way do you want to have it? So, which way is it? I'm not going to, you don't see me hitting love and like on that quote that Jeff just talked about. And I've actually called him up, because he is a friend of mine, and said, what are you doing? All right? I said, what are you doing? So that's my one. It's a page. It's not my Selectmen Mike Rosen page, right? It's my personal Facebook page. I keep it public though, because I'm a public figure, and I think in that regard, I have nothing to hide, right? I could keep all that private. No one would know. I keep it public because transparency, right? If I'm going to believe in something, and I'm going to stand for something, I'm going to stand for something. But I'm not going to censor people on my page who are sharing their opinions and beliefs. But when someone says something, like the example I just gave, I'm going to say, no, wait a second. This guy's lived here for generations. I think he loves this town, right? I think he loves this town. We disagree on some things, but we agree more than we disagree. So I do take issue with that positioning of what's going on. But again, we could he say, she said this forever.
And I apologize. I thought you were done talking. I did not mean to interrupt you. I think what I was going to say is that we're not talking about everyone else at that rally. You posted a picture of Jeff and you called out Jeff for something that you did as well. Now, in my statement of saying, condemning this, by not posting anything else against it, I'm not asking you to delete it. I agree with you. I've heard that comment before in Southbury. It's a big thing. If you delete it, censorship. And I agree. I wouldn't want to be in that position either. What I'm saying is, where were you in a response, in a public way, coming out and saying, that's not true? That's a town employee that you're talking about, and that's not true.
I'll respond just to that, and then I'd like to move. I'm going to move that we vote.
I will say this. I'm not sure my brother has seen this post by this gentleman. But what I'm seeing here is, I'm sure he'll contact an attorney. Is Jeff Manville tied to this hate group? He says. And then he says, I'm sure his brother Dwayne is. And that's a pretty strong statement about a police officer, someone who's working in this town and a citizen of this town, to say, I'm sure his brother is part of a hate group. That's pretty strong.
We say hate has no home in Southbury, nor should it have, but it does seem to have a home when you go to Mike's Facebook pages and posts. There seems to be a magnet for hatred there. And the posts are not necessarily for Mike, but they're there. They're on his page. If Eric Berthel had done something like that, and he had posts of, a hateful nature, he would be eviscerated by the press. I mean, we've even heard public comment today about Eric. He had some arcane little sticker on the back window of his car, and it's been in major newspapers as a headline article. It was in the Rep-Am the other day, and we had public comment on it. And I know Eric. I know him quite well. He is not a wacko from QAnon. I don't know why he had that thing on there. It's some clever word. But there's a double standard that goes on. And if a conservative, if a Republican says anything slightly that could be construed as a hate comment or a bigotry comment, they get killed. But Mike, you post stuff and stuff gets posted on your pages.
Thank you for clarifying that.
That's just nasty and horrible and vile. I mean, my wife's been accused of using the N-word, basically.
That actually, she was not. I want to clarify that.
How you read it.
I just read it again.
Pissed off about it.
I just read it again, and I understand how you might have read it there. I just read it again in the comments that were given, and that's not what was said. Someone asked if the protesters were yelling, right? If those were the protesters, they didn't mean these people in the picture. It meant the protesters that were yelling the N-word. And there were a small group. And on another post, I said, I don't think those were speaking for everybody at that group. There were 3 people I heard who used the word, but most of the folks were just cheering and screaming and holding flags. So listen, I am going to move this to a vote. Ask that we make a motion to vote so you guys can make a decision. So I make a motion to move this to a vote.
I'll second.
Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. There's nothing on the agenda
Right,
for us to vote for.
Right, we've discussed it, but we haven't added it to the agenda.
I'll leave it at that for a moment.
So we can't take a vote on this unless it's added to the agenda. And I think the wording would have to be add to the agenda a resolution against hatred and bigotry. So we can't take that motion right now. I think the point has gotten across to some of the people here, if not all of us, that these elections and these emotions and the passion that goes along with all this, and I've been watching this, has caused a divide amongst our people, our citizens. I made the statement that I went to that rally in support of the police, who I know were shook by this and retreating in their blue line, if you will, in an effort of what I've made to make, craft, and design a very inclusive community police force. The rest of the world, I have enough to do here with this community and the focus I'm trying to be on. So my concern was stated in the statement of why I was there and the trouble that can brew when our police do not feel supported by their citizens or their administration. And all they're hearing was a flip of a switch from support, and what they're seeing was hatred for what they do. And that was why I was there. So I see these things happening. That's why I don't comment on Facebook. I don't get involved in that. I watch it, and sometimes I'm very would like to. This right here, to someone, Mr. Goldsmith, accusing or stating that my brother is in a hate group. That's what the statement says. And I see this happening, and I watched it happen with me.
It's still
Accusations.
happening, Jeff, on the same page.
I know. They're still.
It hasn't ended.
No, it's not ended, and it was all I could do to get the Waterbury Republican to print the article that cleared me. And yet it's still being put out there by the same suspects. And frankly, I have not seen anybody stand there and say, I don't believe this is true, or I know it's not true. And yet they keep, and it's going to continue. And it bothers me. I think Justin Betty has known my family, extensive family, generational families, and knows pretty much how I was brought up. My parents who brought me up, and as a very left-wing Democratic friend of mine said, I've known you since you were 10 years old and you wouldn't be in my house. And yet nobody came and nobody stood up. Nobody stood up. And I was left that we don't have a venue to investigate this. So this is left out there. And if we're going to try to heal this, then we have to speak up. And if it doesn't fit our side, we still have to speak up. I would ask, I think we've had a discussion here. We do have to get to the Board of Ed members. I would ask that we've discussed this. I say we should move on to the executive session, give this some thoughts, and we should all look in the mirror about when it's time to step up when someone says something and we know in our heart it's not true. But I'll tell you what, I was left out there. And there should have been more people speaking up about my family, what that was about. And now I got my brother, someone saying about a hate group. And he may at times hate me, but he is not in a hate group. And I tried to contact him last night about this comment. But I will by the weekend and see what he thinks he ought to do about that comment. So, if it's okay with everybody else, I would like to move on to the executive session.
Fair enough.
Do I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of interviewing the Board of Education people?
So moved, with the addition that we will be inviting Thomas Marks and Ben Strange into the executive session.
Thank you. Do I have a
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll move into executive session.